Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. This has been really a delightful conference already, and we're just really getting into the substance of this meeting. So thank you very much, and I'm very much looking forward to what's coming next. Folks, this morning I have the pleasure of introducing quite a personality here, Colonel Scott D. Broder. Colonel Broder is the director of the National Space Defense Center and director of operations of the Joint Task Force Space Defense. Whew, that's a lot. He ensures synchronization and unified action in the space warfighting domain with mission partners across Department of Defense and the intelligence community to conduct space superiority operations in order to deter aggression against the US and allies, to protect and defend space capabilities, and to defeat adversaries throughout the continuum of conflict. Colonel Broder commissioned through Reserve Officer Training Corps in 1997. Don't want to date him. He served in a variety of operational assignments in ICBMs, space electronic warfare, space battle management, space command and control, and he deployed numerous times in support of contingency operations worldwide. Prior to his current assignment, Colonel Broder commanded the 614th Air Operations Center and Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. Sir, you are truly an expert in this field and have plenty of experience. So with that, I'd like to hand the microphone over to you to hear your words.
Good morning and aloha. I want to start off on behalf of my boss, Major General Tom James. He's the commander of Joint Task Force Space Defense. I just want to say thanks to the committee that put on this conference for inviting us to be a part of it. It's just been an awesome experience thus far, and I just want to pass on his thank you. You know, he was coming here and he unexpectedly was unable to attend. So we had a quick meeting. This was right before the conference, and he said, I need someone to cover my speaking engagements. I raised my hand so quick, I literally like threw out my shoulder. And I'm not a physical therapist type person, but I know that if you alternate like heat and cold, it's supposed to help loosen things up. So I've been in the infinity pool at my hotel for kind of the cold part, and then alternating into the hot tub for the hot part, and I think for the next couple of days I should be doing pretty good. All my military retired friends are like, you better get that documented in your record. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. I was gonna add on to some of my background, but that was a fantastic day. Thank you for introducing me. I've been on the job at the NSDC, the National Space Defense Center, for just over 1 year, and coincidentally, when I transitioned to the Space Force, I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary on that transition as well. But I want to talk to you about really the purpose and the mission of JTF-SD, Joint Task Force for Space Defense, and I want to really give you some insight on how we do protect and defend to protect the U.S., our allies, commercial, on-orbit space assets, and how we protect the capabilities that really enable many of the things about the way we live and how we fight as a nation, as a coalition. Now, it's important to remember, and this was a piece that General Burt brought up yesterday, you know, space is acknowledged as a warfighting domain. There's no doubt about that. And it's not a warfighting domain because of what JTF-SD is doing. It's not because that's what we wanted it to be. It's because what our adversaries have done in the domain. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what I perceive as the threat and what we're seeing today. Our job, though, is to provide that protect and defend capability so that we can, as the U.S. and with our allies, maintain the competitive advantage that we have in space. This briefing that I have for you today, we normally don't brief this at the unclassified level. I mean, it's difficult to talk at the full range of what we do and the scope inside the Joint Task Force for Space Defense at that classification level. But I built this briefing with the help of our staff at the task force, and I was actually able to present a portion of this to industry a couple weeks ago at Catalyst Campus in Colorado Springs. So I have done one version of this before. But this is really to grow the exposure of what we do to a wider audience. So this crowd, this space domain awareness professionals crowd, is really someone we want to touch so that we can give you more insight into what we do. And this will build and complement on what we're already working together with many of you through sprint advanced concept training exercises. And so we conduct those 3 times a year. And in fact, this year, we were able to work much more closely with General Burt and her team in California to prepare them to start doing their own sprint advanced concept training evolutions. And so you'll see and have an opportunity to participate in those more than 3 times per year as they stand up their capability as well. Okay, I would like to, in order to kind of give you the true and the full picture, I'm going to start with a little bit of history. And if you guys could bring up my charts, that'd be great. Okay, back in 2015, this effort that has become JTF Space Defense really started with an initiative that DepSecDef Bob Work came up with. And he was working, there's a series of meetings that were going on, and he was working with some key players in the space enterprise. Admiral Haney, who was the STRATCOM commander at the time. General Hyten was the Air Force Space Command commander at the time. The Honorable Betty Sapp, she was the director of the NRO. Miss Stephanie O'Sullivan was representing the department, the DNI. And there was, at that time, we were onboarding and talking about new space superiority capabilities. And so we had to think of a way of how were we going to employ these capabilities, how would it come together. And there was a sense that we needed to really bring together ops and intel closer in a better relationship that we've never been before. In fact, we wanted to have unity of action. We wanted to have one voice between the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and the NRO. And so that plus an idea of coming together to do experimentation was really the birthplace of this idea that we would have something for protect and defend. Okay, on 1 October, I was worried that I wasn't going to get this to work. I kept thinking, you run the most powerful space superiority ops center in the world. Please let the clicker work. In 1 October 2015, the Secretary of Defense established the JICSPOC, the Joint Interagency Combined Space Operations Center. It was a mouthful now, as much as it was then. DepSecDef Work, he said his thoughts on this new center was, hey, this is the first organizational construct of the 3rd offset strategy. And there were 3 objectives, as you see outlined here, was the initial marching orders of this organization. About a year and a half after the JICSPOC was established at Schriever in Colorado Springs, General Hyten had then become the STRATCOM commander. He took over for Admiral Haney, and he renamed it. There was a lot of, I was at STRATCOM at the time. There was a lot of consternation about the name. It's confusing. What are they really doing? It's really not aligned to what the mission area is. So he said, let's just call it what it is. You know, this is like classic General Hyten. We're going to call it what it is. It's going to be the National Space Defense Center. And so that, at that moment, they had renamed the organization. And then in January 2018, we hit a huge milestone. The National Space Defense Center established a 24/7 operations footprint where we were then able to really say, we have the capability to do protect and defend for the United States and her allies. And so this, I don't want to dismiss what we were doing in the JICSPOC because there was still a lot of that experimentation work that still continues on to today. But this really normalized the organization to what it has blossomed into as we see it today, as a 24/7 space superiority ops center. Again, another big change for us came on the 29th of August in 2019 when the president signed the NDAA that established United States Space Command as a combatant command, and as a geographic area of responsibility of 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. So this was pretty huge. Of course, General Raymond was then named as the first commander of U.S. Space Command, and he in turn immediately established two components of that combatant command. He established the Combined Force Space Component Command, which of course General Burt briefed yesterday. She leads that organization in California. That her primary ops center, she has many, but her primary integrating ops center is the Combined Space Operations Center, and they are responsible for theater support to the warfighter. And if you think of all the space capabilities on orbit providing effects to the ground, missile warning, overhead persistent infrared, position navigation timing, SATCOM, space electronic warfare, she's doing those capabilities to enable some ground terrestrial scheme of maneuver. General Raymond also stood up a component, Joint Task Force for Space Defense, to take everything that's providing those capabilities and protecting all those things in orbit, in the domain. And so that kind of distinguishes the roles and responsibilities of the two, although there are still some overlap. General James, when he wrote his mission statement, in the very first line, he talks to unified action. And so as we stood this organization up, we never lost the true special sauce to what JTF SD brings to the fight, and that's unified action between the Department of Defense, the NRO, and the intelligence community. And what I would add that we've grown is the relationship across this forum in space domain awareness, commercial partners, allies, academia, et cetera. That's now more than ever coming together at Joint Task Force for Space Defense. We have three focus areas, the first being space domain awareness. So just broadly, my thoughts on space domain awareness is our ability to understand precisely what's happening throughout the domain in real time. Now again, what makes the National Space Defense Center a little bit different about space domain awareness is we are creating, if you will, an integrated sensor support plan that not only takes advantage of the Department of Defense's SSN and contributing sensors, but it's also bringing in non-traditional sensors and commercial sensors through our Joint Task Force Commercial Office at Catalyst Campus. It's bringing in allied sensors, it's bringing in intelligence sensors and other mission partners, and bringing all that together to fuse in one place at the right classification level, all that data, so that we can make decisions primarily to do our second focus area, which is indications and warning. That's not just for us, that's not just for United States Space Command, that's for all combatant commands, that's for commercial partners, that's for other components. This is for tactical units. What we're doing is taking all the data we can get, and we're trying to fuse a picture that's relevant to a number of customers, and we're trying to push that out at the right level, at the right classification level, and it goes out at all classification levels so that we can have an understanding of the space domain and the mission areas that we provide for space superiority. The third focus area is space superiority command and control. We have the ability to see to space superiority systems from the JTF through the National Space Defense Center, and we have right now a handful of systems that we're actively apportioned to us, and we are onboarding back to the JIC-SPOC experiment days. Those capabilities that were originally talked about for the JIC-SPOC are starting to be onboarded, and we work through the tactics, techniques, and procedures and all the things that we need to be able to command and control those tactical units as they come online. Okay, I'm going to try to scope a little bit of the problem for you, and General Burt alluded to some of her perspective on SDA yesterday, but we created a little bit more of a chart to give you a little bit of scope of our problem. This data is, first of all, because you'll be like, that's not the right number. This data came from spacetrack.org on the 10th of July when we first built this chart. So at the time this was built, think of this as 23,501 trackable objects. Each one of those little satellites that are represented on this chart stand for 20 objects. And so as we think about space domain awareness, a little less than half of that we know is debris. Again, this is July data. 2,200 rocket bodies, 251 who knows what, and that equals roughly 7,600 payloads in orbit. That further breaks down to about 49% of that is US stuff. Russia has about 20% of that. China has about 6% of that. The UK about 4%, and Japan about 2.5%. Now, what's more interesting about this is the fact that a couple years ago, about 100% would have been those 5 countries, but now there is about a line and a half left of satellites on there. That represents 95 countries. In fact, that last satellite, 20 objects, represents 20 countries, and they each have 1 payload. And so from a proliferation perspective, these numbers are going to grow. More people are seeing the advantages of being in the space domain. It creates a congested SDA problem for us, but there are a growing number of countries who are becoming players in the space domain. That reliance has been keyed in by our competitors and our adversaries, and they're taking advantage to hold our systems at risk in that domain. The threats we have right now are more diverse. Oh, I told you I only gave this one time before. The threats we had are a little bit diverse right now, and you can look at really the spectrum of threats right now that face the U.S. include the following. So we have anti-satellites that I'll talk about here in just a little bit, anti-satellite weapons. There's cyber threats out there. Obviously, space electronic warfare and jamming, terrestrial jamming. There's always the threat of attacking one of our ground infrastructure, definitely fragile and limited infrastructure. The laser threat is there throughout the continuum, and then of course there's always a fear of nukes. From the Joint Task Force Space Defense, these aren't what I'm worried about, because we have people that do some of this stuff. Cybercom worries about the cyber piece of this. There are Space Force base installation and garrison commanders that take care of our infrastructure and provide physical security for us, so that's not a JTF role and responsibility. And of course, STRATCOM has the nuke mission, which really just leaves us with these threats. And to understand that, you have to know a little bit about the history of how our threats grew in the domain. Again, General Burt mentioned this a little bit in her comments yesterday, but there was from the time that we really considered the U.S. and the coalition fighting the first space war, there's a pretty big bathtub of benign space environment up until about 2007, where the Chinese demonstrated their ability to launch a missile, an anti-satellite weapon, at one of their own weather satellites, creating a boatload of debris. That changed the paradigm. And so that's kicked off the environment that we know today. And interestingly, when we talked, we were kind of joking and picking on SPADOC yesterday. And the question was, in 2004 and 2005, we were supposed to change this system out. And could you imagine the requirements that were written in the early 2000s for that system, and then after 2007, what that requirement became? Well, let's take an order of magnitude more what happened after that, and what the environment looked like, and what the conditions were, and what were we asking this system to do. And we've been chasing that changing environment ever since. After the debris issue, the Russians, they had the piece of junk that came back to life and started doing rendezvous in proximity. It's like, whoa, okay, that's not a benign environment anymore. They started launching the Russian nesting doll technology, having one satellite release another satellite that had a kinetic kill mechanism on it. And then they launched it again and they put it in coplanar with a US high-value asset. This is not the same conditions that we've been accustomed to, and now this is becoming the norm. This organizational chart shows you how we are organized to conduct our mission today. Again, the commander, Major General Tom James, Army General. His deputy, fairly new in the seat, is Brigadier General Dennis Bythewood. We have our IC, Intelligence Community Senior Representative, is Dr. Kirkpatrick. He wears a number of hats, but he is on also the U.S. Space Comm staff, but he is also our IC Senior Rep. We have our tech director here is fielding questions online here for us, Mr. Calabrese. Our senior enlisted leader, Chief Simmons, is here in the audience as well. And you can see we have a typical joint staff construct, and then of course I'm the J3 operations officer, and I'm dual-hatted as the NSCC director. And you can see that container around the NSCC, and you'll also see the J2 in there. And so we fuse those two parts of the joint staff to ensure the operational intelligence is feeding the operations at the National Space Defense Center. And then on the ops side, of course, we have our operations crews and our divisions. I cannot say enough good things about the professionals that I work with at the NSTC and the JTF. We are represented from all services. We have airmen and guardians. We have sailors and soldiers. We have professional civilian corps. We have extraordinary contractors. We have a great team that comes together to provide our footprint to do the protect and defend and the space superiority mission. We also have a fairly robust, again, more so than anywhere that I know, the representatives from our intelligence community that either serve as embeds or as liaison officers within the center to help us fuse foundational intelligence with operational intelligence. Okay, I got 8 minutes left. I got one more chart, and then you guys can hit me with a question. Okay, I'm just going to quickly talk, just because I've got a captive audience with industry here, what you guys can do to help me right now. So I've got 4 quick things. The first is this architecture is latent, and we need data in seconds, not in minutes, not in hours, not in days. The more things we can get machine to machine and human out of the loop, the better, in my opinion. The data that you provide needs to be accurate and trustworthy, and we need to get to that. The better we are at that, the better we are at the space superiority operations. The format. So we've had conversations for 3 days this week, starting at the AFRL piece earlier this week and then kind of continuing through yesterday. The government has not decided what we want our format to be, but when we do decide in short order, I need y'all to be all in on getting onto that format. And so we know we have the action, but once that happens, we need you to be all in to make that work, and that's going to help us tremendously to get to the next level of where we need to be for SDA. And then finally, our SDA coverage. We still have gaps in the architecture, both geographically. We have phenomenology gaps. We could use more sensors, space-based sensors. And so there are places where you can make strategic decisions that will help our overall footprint in calculus. Okay, I shorted you guys just a little bit. I'm just going to reemphasize that the militarization and the weaponization of space happened before JTF was stood up. I just talked to you a little bit about a portion of the threat that's out there. It's a warfighting domain. Our ability at the JTF to provide that space domain awareness, the indications and warning, and the command and control of space superiority are what's going to keep our competitive advantage in space. Daniel, what do you got for me?
Sir, thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. We're glad to have seen a new presentation. First question, I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative.
Okay.
We've discussed this one. So Secure World Foundation, my organization, we promote space sustainability, long-term sustainability of space activities. We want to make sure that we'll be able to keep doing the things we're doing for the long term. You mentioned the 2007 Chinese ASAT test where they created considerable amounts of debris. We are also very concerned about debris generating ASATs. So we're just wondering, does sustainability play a role in your planning and in your choice of operations? And does it limit any of your options when you're considering what you're going to do?
It absolutely does. That's a great question. The fact that China has created a response option that is debris causing and caused the way that they did this was catastrophic. I mean, we're still tracking the debris that came from that, and from my opinion, that is wholly irresponsible. When we create our response options, that is absolutely part of the calculation of, hey, what's this going to do to the overall sustainability of the environment? Because anything that takes place or causes us to, if our action creates another reaction where our adversaries may respond in a debris-causing action, that environment's going to affect everyone. So first and foremost, we don't want to have a war in space, and that's kind of the cool thing about once you realize the nature of warfighting in space is it's just warfighting. And so we can take action in any other domain and be able to operate throughout the spectrum to respond, and it doesn't have to be what China and Russia are doing, which is just, in my opinion, belligerence in the domain.
Excellent, and we're very glad to hear you say that that kind of behavior is irresponsible. So some other questions coming in from the audience. Sir, how would you go about acquiring new SDA capabilities from the commercial sector?
How do we repeat the question?
How would you go about acquiring new space data awareness, from the commercial sector, and how could you work with private actors?
Yeah, right now we have our we call it the JCO, our JTF for Space Defense commercial office at Catalyst Campus. That's our ability right now to ingest. What's one way to ingest commercial data into our warfighting calculus. But really, the magic happens through our sprint advanced concept training exercises. And so this gives commercial companies an opportunity without being on any type of contract or obligation to either witness how it happens and observe, or participate where you could actually follow along, provide data, receive information, and play along so that once you have everything suited to here's how we think we could provide, we could maybe onboard something coming from that. But our SAC-T events are really the secret to be able to integrate with us and see what's feasible and what's not. And we've learned a ton from doing that methodology.
Excellent. Okay, final question, and then we'll let you go. There is a growing interest in reducing classification of space capabilities. Do you believe this will assist with defense?
Absolutely. We have right now, we have hurt ourselves through our classification red tape. And so I've had a ton of experience at the Combined Space Operations Center before this job, and even here, 1 year ago, you wouldn't get a briefing like this because it's too classified and we can't go there. And so now we've taken liberties to be able to drive down, and this isn't at just my level, it's at senior leader level. Where we need help is everyone in between. And that's the part where the closer we can get to less classified, the better. And I think it helps us not only integrate better, but it helps us message what our intentions are, and it kind of reduces the secrecy that kind of is shrouded in this warfighting domain.
Colonel, let me thank you on behalf
I appreciate it.
Here. Thank you very much. Everyone, please join me in thanking the Colonel.